So, hi guys, it's Maria Pieri here. I'm the BSME 2020 Chair and Editorial Director for National Geographic Traveller UK. A couple of housekeeping points. Don't worry, you can't be seen by us or heard, but you can use the chat function, so we will keep an eye out on this for you. And also, don't forget, you can go onto the top of the screen to change the view to gallery or speaker view. And now on to the main event. Thank you for joining myself, Jaimie Kaffash, Steve Ford and Beth Kennedy today for our lockdown lunch. Do post any questions you may have in the chat and we'll endeavour to answer during this session. So this is our third lockdown lunch now, and the aim of it is for us to be able to speak to these three amazing editors in the thick of the biggest health story in 100 years. We will be discussing issues such as managing a news cycle that is changing by the hour, getting the tone right for readers who are stressed and risking their lives, and keeping on top of more content than ever with smaller teams. We will also be exploring whether the high volumes of traffic are leading to increased revenue and what editors can do to support the commercial side of the business. So I'm going to hand over straight away to Jaimie Kaffash, editor of Pulse. He's going to introduce himself and tell us a bit more about what he does.
Hi there. Hi there, everyone. My name's Jaimie Kaffash. I'm editor of Pulse magazine. We're a magazine for GPs. So I've been editor for the last 2 years. Now, obviously, never faced anything like this. I don't think anyone has. It's been quite an exceptional time for all journalists, but I'd say especially us health journalists. I don't think we're short of things to write about, but obviously, like everyone else, we're also having problems with revenue, which we'll probably discuss later on.
That's great, thank you. Now straight over to Steve Ford, editor of Nursing Times.
Yeah, hi there. So my name's Steve. I've been the editor of Nursing Times also for just coming up for 2 years now, and before that I was the news editor. So I've worked in health for all my career. And yes, like Jaimie says, truly unprecedented times. My readers are in the thick of it, in the national press as well as in the specialist media spotlight constantly at the moment. So yeah, we are really writing an awful lot of stuff at the moment. Again, as discussed, with fewer people around and a lot of pressure.
Thank you, Steve. Last but not least, Beth Kennedy, editor of C&D, who's very new to the role. So we want to hear lots from you, what it's like being thrown in at the deep end.
Yeah, so my name's Beth Kennedy. I am the editor of C&D, which is a magazine for the UK's community pharmacists and community pharmacy teams. So we serve roughly 80,000, a region of 80,000, I think, and we get about 114 unique fees every month. Not sure what that looks like in the current situation because we've seen it, I'm sure, as Jaimie and Steve will have seen as well, we've seen a massive uptick in traffic since this whole situation started. I actually started at C&D about 6 weeks before full lockdown started, so really thrown in at the deep end. But it's been a brilliant learning curve and the team is absolutely fantastic, so I'm very, very lucky. And before that, I was at Kagora alongside Jaimie, working on a number of different health titles there. And I actually started off my career at C&D, so it's been a nice kind of circular career to date so far.
That's great, thank you. So we'll go straight on to the questions. I guess the main one for us is how are you managing to cope with reporting the news based on your frequency in titles? I mean, you must be having things coming at you all the time and actually just working out what's important, how to cover it. It's changing all the time. It's very fluid. How are you addressing this? Shall I throw that over to Jaimie first and then each of you to input?
Thing. So we're actually a monthly magazine, which has caused a lot of problems because things are sort of changing by the hour at the moment. So we've got a lead-up time. We go to press on the Friday. It normally lands on people's desks next Friday. So actually thinking of stuff to put an issue has been a real problem. It's been one of the biggest problems that we've had so far, in fact. So we've had to do a lot of forward-looking pieces. So we've had to think, what is general practice going to look like after this is all over? That was our first cover feature we did during the pandemic. Second one was an exclusive survey, which went down pretty well. Again, it's something we got national coverage for, but it's something that we could also hold back as well. So it has been a bit of a problem, actually, thinking of content for that long lead up time. In terms of online, obviously we're having absolutely no trouble whatsoever filling our newsletters every day. We're actually having a problem thinking what to leave out. And luckily, we've got a fantastic news team. We actually had our news editor come back from maternity leave a month before, and she's been superb. Sophia, I think she's watching. But that has been a massive help. I mean, I sometimes feel quite embarrassed, actually, because I've been staying away from the news side because we've got so many other things on at the moment. I actually feel like I'm a couple of days behind the rest of the news team, who have all been absolutely superb. But thinking what to put in the news ed, no, that's not been any problem. I know that other editors have had trouble with this kind of stuff, thinking of finding content when they're not doing something health related. But at the moment, it has been a real problem finding things to leave out. I mean, I use an example. There's an example I've used in one of the previous lockdowns, actually, was we had a story about GPs rejecting the contract. Now, normally that would be the biggest story of the year. For us, on that day, it was actually the third biggest story of the day. Normally, any other year, it would have been biggest story of the year, most views, etc. We've got so much to write about. Something's happening every hour. We're working on an hourly news cycle at the moment. So content-wise, we're certainly not struggling.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That must be so hard to actually choose what to run. What about you, Beth? How are you finding it?
We're actually quite lucky in that respect because we're a digital title, and so we don't have to be thinking about making sure that what we're writing is still relevant for a print title when things are changing, as Jaimie said, hourly. But yeah, I agree with him. It's incredibly difficult to know what to run, what order to put them in on the newsletter, what should take priority, who should be working on what. And I think I'm feeling as well just a sense of guilt sometimes. What could we be doing more? What should we be doing more? And I think there's an element of imposter syndrome there anyway, which I'm sure lots of people listening in will be familiar with. But I think just generally it can be a little bit overwhelming just when you've got the biggest story of the year, of the decade really, and with that comes a lot of responsibility for us as health editors, but also a tremendous amount of pressure to make sure that you are really not only making sure that your readers are getting exactly what they need from you, but making sure that as journalists we're taking every opportunity and really pushing that to kind of leverage the brand however you can. But yeah, it's really, really tough at the moment. And again, I'm incredibly lucky to have a really good team, really brilliant at all working together, although naturally working remotely does mean that it's quite difficult to keep on track of the many different threads of conversations that are going on all the time, and quite often on different mediums as well. So we might have a conversation that's going on in Slack, we might have a conversation that's going on simultaneously by email and then on Zoom. So it can be quite challenging, but I think we're kind of just learning how to roll with the punches a bit and kind of just sharpening everything in those processes as we go along, really.
That's great, thank you. We'll come back to that actually. The overwhelming different types of medium that you are being connected with and by and from whom. Steve, for you, what about you? How are you finding trying to keep pace of all the stories at the moment?
Well, yeah, very similar from the sort of print point of view. Of course, we had it's the International Year of the Nurse and the Midwife, in fact, 2020. So we had lots of plans. I was actually very well planned this year compared to any other year that I've ever done this. But of course, we had to completely rip that up. And literally every issue for, the last 2 months has been focused on COVID-19 and will be for the foreseeable, the different phases of it. And like people have said, it's trying to make sure the content that we put in there is not immediately historic. So, we've done a big survey. Despite having fewer resources, we've actually launched a campaign just because our readers obviously are so central to this, to try and give them some support. We've got that out there, and now it's just trying to keep that rolling. Likewise with the daily stuff, it's that trying to decide what to run, where to draw the line. We've sent out some huge newsletters, and also not that the reporter's not just desperately trying to cover everything, but trying to carve out our own niche and get some exclusives that comes against that sort of backdrop of the fact that it is so much the national news as well. And people are running stories about nurses, of course, on their front pages and things like that. And there's obviously very much the rather the sad side to it that our readers have actually died over the last couple of months due to being exposed to this. And so how do we deal with that? we wanted to write sensitive stories about the various people who have succumbed, but do you try and write about everyone? Do you just write about registered nurses? But then does that affect healthcare assistants? And so you've got to try and draw this line over who you write about, and we've set up a page on the website, but it's trying to keep that up to date and things like that, which is a job in itself. So it's just trying to be sensitive at the same time as sort of natural urge to report things. So yeah, there's lots to think about, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah. That brings me straight on to the next point, actually, which you've just talked about, how the struggle for everyone to get that tone right. It seems even more important for you guys, but your readers are on the front line of the battle. How are you getting that tone right? You've talked about it there, Steve. Thank you. Jaimie, what about you? How are you finding that you're having to adapt or think about the tone that you are writing with? Is it different from what you were doing before? How is it different? What's changed?
Yeah, I mean, tone is so important for us. So obviously, as Steve has pointed out, our readers on the front line, they are seeing these people. Most of them, are quite scared for their lives. So immediately, I think as a team, we all knew that tone was probably the most important thing. I'd say even above getting exclusive stories. Our currency is exclusive stories, but there were. We said at the start of this whole pandemic, actually, we are willing to sort of sacrifice some exclusivity to make sure we got the tone right. So immediately we said we're going to try and stay away from the sort of gotcha stories. So, for example, we had Jeremy Hunt talking about how he wished he'd employed more doctors when he was health secretary. Normally, we'd put that story up as a lead story. It would get tons and tons of views. But in this case, we thought this probably isn't what we're supposed to be doing. At the moment, there's advice coming out every single day. There's stuff coming out about things that will change a GP's job, things that they need to know about. And actually, we should be reporting a bit more soberly. Now, that's certainly not to say we're not criticising the government. We are criticising when there's something going wrong. But there has been a slight change of approach in that way. So we're trying to keep our criticism to be, I don't want to say constructive, but in areas where we think it will make a difference. So, for example, PPE, we've doing so much on PPE, GPs not getting PPE. Obviously, you look at secondary care, you look at hospitals, PPE, they are getting them there. Probably not enough, but general practice sort of probably last in line. I'd say pharmacy would probably think that as well in Beth's case. But so we want to focus on that. We want to show this is what GPs are doing. We ran a story last week on 1 in 4 GPs weren't getting the right PPE. So stuff that might actually make a change. So we're looking at, we've got a list of sort of the big topics that we're doing. So things that will actually matter to GPs, like the number of black and minority ethnic doctors who are dying. So it's a massive problem at the moment. We're looking at testing. These are things that are actually going to make a change. If we start reporting this and start reporting about the problems, then things might actually change. It's probably not something we would have done before this whole pandemic. If we got a good story, we got a good story. But now we're really thinking in terms of how help you as a GP, as a reader, to feel safer, to do your job better. So we're viewing everything through that sort of prism at the moment, which is something we didn't really do before as such. But there has been a change in tone in that way.
So not only has that seen a change in tone, but also a change in almost approach to the actual news stories you're selecting, which is interesting to how you're actually putting them across to the reader. Yeah. Have you found the same, Beth? Are you seeing the same kind of thing from your side?
Absolutely. So I'm really glad Jaimie brought that up. So we're again just thinking in terms of where we can be bashing the government, where it's right to do so, and where we can actually make a difference in doing that. It's almost like picking your battles. There's plenty to criticise about the government's approach in all of this, plenty specifically in terms of pharmacy as well. But I think it's really just looking at where you can make the maximum impact for your readers, because we are working with a limited resources and a limited team. So, for example, we campaigned on an issue. It was a really short, sharp campaign. Beginning of last week, it was announced that there'd be basically a COVID death in service life assurance for frontline healthcare workers who died as a result of COVID. And pharmacists weren't originally part of that. They were only going to be covered in exceptional circumstances, which we just felt was completely unacceptable, given that pharmacies are still open. They're probably, of all of the frontline healthcare services in the community, they're the ones that are kind of working the most as normal. And so I think we really kind of ran with that. I did an open letter to Matt Hancock to try and overturn this. We did a letter template so readers could send it to their MPs. We did a petition that has garnered, I think, almost 10,000 signatures or something. And that decision for community pharmacists was overturned less than 24 hours later. So that was brilliant that we could kind of make a bit of difference in that. We're still carrying on with that campaign because pharmacy teams, we're not sure whether or not they're covered yet, when of course they should be. They're as much at risk as pharmacists in all of this. So very much just looking at ways that we can really make the biggest impact. But also I agree with Jaimie in terms of how we would normally cover stories. So we're really trying to work out the best way that we can show very, very complex regulatory or legal stories. Because we know, I think we're all guilty of it, of just skimming stories and maybe not reading exactly what's being said or missing out key elements. And that can, I think, for us as journalists, unwittingly mean that we are contributing to confusion around certain issues, and that's definitely not what we want to be doing, especially not now. So we're thinking kind of how we can front load those stories, making sure that they're as easy to understand as possible, and we got that information in there as quickly and as easily digestible as possible. So that might be putting bullet points at the top with the main things that you need to know, for example. So yeah, I think it's just really making sure that we're being as responsible as possible. And as Jaimie said, it's not about the big gotcha wins at the moment. I think the big win at the moment is making sure that our readers trust us for accurate information and that we're helping them get through this.
I mean, can I just jump in as well? Another thing, I think Beth's completely right there, but another thing is that I think we're going to be judged. I think all journalists, but especially healthcare editors, are going to be judged on how you approached everything during the pandemic. So this is something that people are going to remember about Pulse. You know, their first memory, I think the first thought of them is, what were they like during the pandemic? If there was that element that they weren't being completely responsible, then that is going to have such a big black mark in the future that it's just not worth it. It's not worth coming up with these stories that might be a little bit, you know, as I said, gotcha. We're going to be judged on that, and as editors, I think we're going to be judged as well. I think in the future, that's how we are going to be judged.
Yeah. So just on that as well. Sorry, just on that as well, we have had a couple of stories where we haven't jumped on things quickly, whereas perhaps some of our colleagues in the same, writing in the same areas as we do have. So, for example, something on being able to get tested at pharmacies like Boots. I think a Public Health England official said that, and it sounded as though it might just be off the top of their head, which it turned out to be. Whereas normally, if we had someone big up in Public Health England saying something like that, we'd have done that as a story that would be enough for us. But I think now we're just making sure that everything is really, really ironclad. Is that the case? Have we gone to as many bodies as possible to get confirmation of that? And actually that wasn't the case in the end. And so not being as desperate to be the first on something really paid dividends in that example there.
Almost a lack of a good turn away from sensationalist stories. So you're basically saying you are being as accurate as possible with all the reporting, which is fantastic to hear. Steve, are you finding that too? Are you finding that, you know, not only have you kind of rethought every single story, but you're actually thinking, right, okay, these are the ones I'll stay away from?
Yeah, I suppose our tone generally tries to be sort of supportive and informative as much as possible anyway, but certainly the number of opportunities for stories that we could have written, ones that I would, you know, perhaps say might be what's the phrase, or clickbait, I think. You know, for example, I think there was something about one of the supermarkets had done something. What do they do now? No, it doesn't matter. Anyway, they described nurses as, you know, somehow they were going to give free stuff away, but they didn't include all nursing staff or something like that. Anyway, you could see there was an easy win story there, but it was a little bit, you know, who's really going to benefit from this? And you know, there's been a lot of criticism on social media for those kinds of stories, and so it's just thinking things through, I think. And as everyone said already, what do our brands, what is my brand, what do we want to be remembered for, and how do we want to approach this? And it's very much, as I said, sort of supportive, informative, but uncovering the bad stuff. I think there's almost been some phases to it. I mean, to begin with, it felt like we were, you know, everyone was sort of pulling together. The government was setting up these, Nightingale hospitals and things, and we were all on side with it. And there was quite a lot of, I don't know, the nursing profession was there, NHS was there, we were there, everyone was pulling in one direction. And then obviously we've had the PPE stuff, the testing stuff, and it's very much there's a sort of, it's changed rather, and there's been sort of these cracks sort of opened up, and it's almost how you do those. Do you massively attack the government right now and say, look, you've messed this up, sort it out, or do you accept that it's a rather complex system and basically, still sort it out? So there are lots of it. There's an awful lot of nuance to thinking about. Certainly, from my point of view, if I'm writing a lead or an editorial on how hard I actually go on criticising who or why or where, which I might normally be sort of, it'd be something easier to write under normal circumstances. But this, there's just everyone's under a lot of pressure, basically. So, sorry, that's a rather waffly answer. There you go.
It's okay. But that kind of takes me on to the next question, which is obviously you were kind of said that you're changing style and tone. Have you had feedback from your readers or your visitors on what you've been doing? What's been the sort of reaction? I know that Jaimie's had an amazing reaction in terms of visitors, the number of visitors to the sites, but have you also had feedback in person or by different mediums about how well you're doing, or what they think you're getting right, or what they think you're getting wrong? Who would like to answer that one? Jaimie,
So we've actually been collecting examples of it. It's always nice to have that to show to the rest of the company. I sent this round to the rest of the team yesterday, actually. So one of our below the line commentators who could, they're below the line. You can imagine what many of them are like. One of them who's been particularly bad over the last few years actually praised Pulse's work, and I was like, that is the highest praise that we can possibly get. But we have been getting quite a lot of decent feedback, actually. So it's really nice to hear, and obviously that's probably what we want more than anything else at the moment. I think the views are probably going to come, the traffic's probably going to come naturally. I think people are just desperate for health information, especially GPs, and we've got so much to write about. So I don't think that's going to be a problem in getting the traffic up. But to actually have people say, no, your coverage has been really responsive and really helpful. So, two of our biggest projects have been some clinical content, which is for GPs to know how to deal with really urgent problems, because obviously it's the kind of stuff that I refer on to hospitals normally, but hospitals just haven't got that capacity, so they're going to be dealing with it. So that's one series that we run, and I've been leading on that, which is, for me, it's been a bit strange because sort of my clinical knowledge sort of goes from knee bone connected to the foot joint. I think that's about as far as my clinical knowledge goes. But so we've been leading on that. I think that's been really well received. We've also got another section, I think. I'm sure Steve and Beth will know that one of the biggest problems is the amount of information that's out there, the amount of diktats from government, the amount of advice and guidance. So it's been, so our deputy editor has been leading on that, having a resources section. This is one place to go to find all the up-to-date guidance in easy to read format. This is what you need to know. That's been really good. One of our favourite bits was on how to 3D print your own PPE, which has been really helpful. It's been really well written as well. Yeah, so we have been getting really good feedback, and obviously that's probably what we're after more than anything else at the moment. Just to know that, just to be able to say to advertisers, especially that people trust us, people like what we're doing, we are being responsible, and also we're also getting the traffic as well.
So what are your traffic figures like? I think you wanted to, if you can share them.
Yeah, sure. So
on the website.
So I would say pretty much on a daily basis we are getting traffic that is higher than our highest ever before the pandemic. So every single day would break the pre-COVID records. We're also getting the other good thing is that we're getting a lot of traffic from signed in people as well. So registered GPs, that has just gone through the roof as well. So showing it's not patients that are coming on to the website, it's actually the people that we want to come onto the website are coming on. So as Steve and Beth will know, health journalism is slightly different in that our advertisers tend to be pharmaceutical companies who can only advertise to healthcare professionals. So we've got this big we've got this we've got this market that obviously is very good for us in one way, because they'll always they can only advertise with us or Nursing Times or C&D, but also it's a bit of a problem when they stop selling, because we haven't really got the expertise within the company to find advertisers outside that. So we have been dealing with that. I think it's been dealing with that pretty well. And I think I'll leave it there because I've been waffling on there.
Okay, don't worry. Steve, do you want to jump in there? How are you doing in terms of seeing traffic rises or responses from readers? How things going for you guys?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try and be more succinct than I was last time. So essentially the traffic has gone gone massive basically. So big spikes at various points, and we had one story. Most of the stories have been doing really well. You can see the average readership for them is a lot higher than it would normally be. But one, I think it went well over 100,000 page views, which is quite a lot for us. I suppose in terms of feedback, I probably haven't had that many. I haven't had sort of people emailing me directly, sort of thing. But I suppose I judge it by the fact that the number of key people from the world of nursing who have been getting in contact with me, either email or Twitter, whatever, wanting to have their views heard on our website or in the magazine, sort of thing, shows that we're hopefully on message, and also I suppose in the fact that we've been picked up as well in the nationals occasionally, and on the radio, etc. So the fact that we're being picked up there as well suggests that we're hopefully doing, we've got it right so far. So yeah, it's certainly done a lot for brand awareness. Obviously all three of us work for pretty well-known titles in the sector anyway, but it's certainly helped externally. I think people remember who we are.
Fantastic, thank you. And Beth, what about you? How are you finding traffic to C&D, and what response are you receiving from your visitors?
So the traffic is really, really high, as Jaimie and Steve have both said. We've had kind of record March and April figures. So we kind of tend to judge year on year rather than month on month. We know how much that fluctuates. But those have been really, really strong. And I think the traffic has been up across the board. So it's not just the news that is getting the highest figures. Some of the most read stories have been things like comment pieces or features, because we're trying to attack everything from as many different angles as possible. We've also made a lot of our specialist clinical content free to access, where normally it is behind a paywall, and that's really, really helping, because we're just kind of making sure that our readers know any clinical information that they need to know, so how certain drugs might interact with the symptoms, or what to consider if you get a patient in with this condition or this condition or this condition, and that's been really, really useful. In terms of feedback, we've had, again, as Jaimie said, some of our below the line commenters who normally don't hold back in a negative sense, have been really, really nice, and have kind of praised us, especially around our campaigning around the life assurance, and including pharmacists in that, because I think that issue in particular was just the nail in the coffin. It was after so many examples where pharmacists hadn't been included on things that they really should have done, where we feel that there's been a lack of appreciation, or readers very much feel that there's been a lack of appreciation or acknowledgement for what they're doing and how much risk they're putting themselves in, and a lack of funding and all of that. So we've had a lot of engagement on social media as well. So I'm not sure if Jaimie and Steve have seen that as well, but it's been an increased engagement across the board. So we'll have more readers coming to us on platforms like Facebook or Twitter and just asking us things, especially if there are some really major unanswered questions, which of course there are at the moment, because the press office is massively deluged with huge amounts of queries from journalists from everywhere. And so, I think the response has generally been positive. There's been one example I can think of where I think we did get the tone a bit wrong, and that was to do with a very complex regulatory story. And again, I think all the information was there, but perhaps that wasn't made clear enough as quickly in the story as it could have been, and so that's formed part of our strategy for just making that as clear as possible, as quickly as possible. And I think just owning up to that and putting our hands up and be like, yeah, we should have made this clearer from the off or whatever, has just been really important. And it feeds back into that responsible journalism and that trust, because we all make mistakes. But I think if you can own up to that, then your readers do respect you more for it, rather than if you try and pretend it never happened.
Have you found, Jaimie, have you found that there are times when you've made perhaps mistakes, or you'd have done things a little bit differently? Is there any stories that you can think of that you might have thought, oh, actually, we should have done it this way?
Yeah, there have. I mean, there's been a couple, actually. There's one that I thought we put a piece up that actually came across a bit promotional and for a company, and that was a mistake. We got told forcefully by readers about that as well, so that was helpful. But there have been other times where I felt, actually, looking back, we got the tone slightly wrong on that, especially at the start. I think, especially at the start of the pandemic, we did get the tone wrong a couple of times. Obviously, take complete responsibility for that. But there have been times. But again, as Beth said, I think that gives you the opportunity to apologise, really. And I think that comes across really well. I mean, they're genuine apologies, but I've got no problem with that. In fact, I wrote an editorial as well the other day about NHS England apologised. I said, look, every single one of us acts under extreme pressure at the moment. We're making mistakes. As journalists, we're making mistakes. We know that healthcare managers are going to be making mistakes. I think that has been reflected in the tone of our reporting on decisions that are being made, especially by the NHS, not as much so by the government, but especially by NHS and Public Health England. I think the idea of just going all in to criticise them I think we haven't really done that because of that as well, because we know that we are under extreme pressure. We're making mistakes, they're making mistakes, these things will happen. So yeah, certainly at the start though, we did definitely make some errors.
Thank you. I've got a question from one of the panelists, to all the panelists, from Rachel Jolie. She asks, do you think your journalism is more accurately covering the stories than the nationals? Do you feel it's important for journalists to work to a really high level at this time? I think we've answered the second one, which is yes. But do you think your journalism is more accurately covering the stories than the nationals? That's probably the question I'll throw out to you. Feel free to step in, whoever wants to talk on that one.
Yeah, can I make a quick point about it? Sorry, Stephen, Beth, but yeah. I would say, and I think they probably might agree with me, that's why I want to get my point in first, but in terms of the health lobby, the health national journalists, I don't think that we necessarily are reporting better than them. I think on the whole they're very responsible. I think actually I'm consistently impressed by how good the health lobby is. In terms of the political journalists, I do think there has been a few errors from them. I mean, certainly the stuff over the testing, 100,000, reaching that 100,000 magic mark. I think there's some real problems with the reporting over that. I'm thinking about one that really infuriated me from Laura Kunsberg, the BBC political reporter, saying that they're going to keep an eye on whether the government is actually going to reach that 100,000 mark. I think all us health journalists think, well, why? For what reason? I mean, we're not going to solve the pandemic if we hit that 100,000 mark. For what reason? There was no kind of analysis around it. Why are we going after that number? Is that number actually something that we should be going towards? What is the long-term strategy there? So I think in terms of the Nationals health journalists, no, I think they're covering this very responsibly. The political side of it, political reporters, I don't think so much, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose similar in that, I suppose it's where some of the papers obviously trying to make a political point. Either they're either pro-government nationals or they're the other side. Perhaps sometimes they've got things a little bit wrong, but that's their agenda, I suppose. But in terms of the actual the health reporting, I mean, quite a few of the people who are actually on those teams out there have worked previously with us for specialist titles, which is sometimes quite unusual, but certainly I can think of a couple of names where those people have come from mags like HSJ, or they've written for Nursing Times or what have you in past lives, so they do understand all the the real nitty gritty. I'm sure we would say we understand all this stuff slightly better than some of them, I suppose, nowadays. But that's what we're there for. We're the specialist press to perhaps find those stories that the nationals don't necessarily fall upon, and explain them really well, and then perhaps they get picked up.
Great, thank you. Beth, you want to add in?
Yeah, just picking up on what Jaimie said about some of them maybe being a bit gotcha, and I think that's because it's drilled into you, I think, in specialist journalism, that you've really got to work back from what your audience needs from you, not necessarily what they want to hear, but what they actively need from you, and it's never so important as in this time. And I think that's perhaps some of the disconnect that we get from the nationals, because I think sometimes maybe that is lost in favour of get the biggest story that you can, rather than what people actually need to know at this time, which might be something completely different. And I think that's what's really, really important to keep in mind during this time. And I think it's kind of ingrained in us as specialist journalists anyway, I think. But it's, as I say, never been so important as right now. And as the guys have both talked about as well, just shelving those stories that where you kind of think, is this more for our agenda as a publication, or trying to be clever journalists, or is this actually going to help our readers? And I think that's no bad thing, and hopefully we can try and keep some of those practices going after this is all over.
Great, thank you. I've got another question from to all the panelists from Michael Petch. The panelists discussed the importance of responsible reporting, and Jaimie mentioned 3D printing PPE. What are the panelists' thoughts about the medical healthcare use of 3D printing during the pandemic?
Quite a nice question. Well, thank you, Michael. There's a bit of a wider point here in that obviously there was a lot of talk at the start about PPE. What is the approved? I've forgotten who it is that approves it, but what's the approved use? And actually, as this has gone on, like in a lot of areas, what is approved has actually just gone to what is actually going to help us right now. So, in terms of 3D printing, for example, this probably isn't approved stuff. This isn't the stuff that PHE is saying that it should be using. But because our readers are in that kind of, are at their end of their tether, they have to find something to use. They have been turned into 3D printing, for example. But I think there's quite a lot of areas where actually sort of the previous rules have sort of gone out the window a little bit. We never even thought about 3D printing your own PPE before this kind of stuff, but needs must. So and that's happening quite a lot of areas. It's not just in terms of PPE. There are other things where, for want of a better, this bit of a cliche, but rule book is being torn up a little bit.
Okay, thank you for that. Beth or Steve, either of you want to jump in on that, or is that?
So 3D printing is not especially my forte, I must admit, but I think
it was a bit left field.
it's an area that I can probably count on my hand the number of times we've written about that in past years. But we did do a couple of stories where universities had turned their their technology departments to 3D printing stuff, and then taking it down to their local NHS trust, particularly if they'd got student nurses who had been training at that university as well, just as a sort of an easy win story that seems might be of interest. But yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just to add to that as well, Steve. One thing that there is, though, there has been actually far more than 3D printing. There has been the help with the community. So the community helping out with PPE. And I think that's been really good, because readers are craving positive stories at the moment, So to just be able to write about that, this is horrible for everyone. But, there are these nice little glimpses. There are these nice little positive aspects coming through. Yeah. So I think that's probably a wider point there is, there is that idea that this community is coming together, and we want to report that because our readers are craving that kind of stuff at the moment.
Sorry, really, go on.
Oh, thank you. So just on that, just trying to report the positives as well. I think we're all very aware, especially as the people who are having to write about it and getting no respite from anything COVID related, really, that there is that craving for positive news. And we tried to reflect that in our reporting as well. So we have a weekly COVID podcast at the moment where we'll sit and speak to a specialist, or maybe a pharmacist working on the front line, or whatever. But at the end, we always have a few minutes just to share some positive stories that have come in from our readers, or positive tweets, or whatever it might be, and we're getting really, really good response to that. So I think it's, again, just all about balance and about sharing those heartwarming stories and things as well. And I'm sure that we'll see that towards the end of the year when we're for example, we got an awards ceremony that we had to push back to the end of the year because of the situation. And so there's obviously plans in there to recognise all the brilliant work that's been done because of this pandemic. And I think we'll get some really heartening stories from that as well.
That's great, thank you. One more question from Rachel Jolie now. Have you been in touch with health reporters in other countries to do international comparisons? I think that's an interesting one. Have you spoken to your counterparts elsewhere globally?
We haven't, but we do have, so one of our reporters is Italian, and so she has done a couple of things for us where she's been speaking to pharmacists in Italy, especially because we know that was where it was really, really, really bad a few weeks ago. And so that was really interesting as well. It was very interesting to draw parallels. So I think this was before most pharmacies had started putting in protective screens, for examples, in their pharmacies, just to help with safety. And so we were able to kind of draw those comparisons and perhaps give our readers some tips about what they could do when the situation became similarly bad a few weeks later.
Jaimie, Steve?
I mean, we haven't been in touch with international, but I think there is a good point here in that at the moment we're learning new data. We're learning about the data. There's new data every single day, basically. So you know, in terms of international comparison, we haven't really done that. But I remember I was speaking to my mum about this yesterday. Actually, we were talking about BME and BME patients and why so many BME GPs have died. But she asked, you know, what is it like in other countries? Are there in other countries of BME? Is there a higher death rate for BME people? And I couldn't answer that, to be honest. I generally can't answer it. So this kind of stuff we learn every single day. And the problem with this, one of the big problems with reporting this is that the data is so it's not being verified. Normally, you know, for a research piece in one of the journals, you'd be going through, you know, peer review. You'd take you 6 months, a year to publish. It's been published sort of like within a few weeks now. So that has been a bit of a problem for us as well. But no, we haven't really been in touch with international reporters because, to be honest, I think they're probably learning in the same way at the same time that we are.
Okay, and Steve?
Yeah, sort of likewise, in that we have covered sort of international angles and things via contacts with you know, leaders, international nursing leaders and things like that, to do stories. And again, obviously, yeah, the evidence is just coming out sort of almost live, isn't it? So we've done some sort of research stories, some of the stuff in the bigger medical journals coming out from China. In terms of being in contact with actual with sort of colleagues, journalistic colleagues around the world. No, we haven't done a huge amount of that. No, I'm afraid not. No.
Can I sort of just a little point to add as well? Sorry, this might sound a little bit trite, but I do think there is aspects of kind of like war reporting in this. Obviously, we're not on the front line. We're not doing anything. We don't compare ourselves to the reporters themselves. But in terms of the actual journalism reporting, you know, you're hearing it's almost chaotic. You're hearing stuff from all different angles. There's different information coming out every single day. You know, unlike war reporting, you can actually probably trust a lot of the. At least they're in good faith. A lot of the stuff that we're hearing is in good faith. But it's this sort of thing of chaos that, you know, you don't really know. There's so much information being thrown at us the whole time, and you know, the government is suffering as well. You know, one of the reasons they didn't move into lockdown early enough was because they were getting conflicting data from everyone. Obviously, that's something we've got to deal with as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from Isabel Sims directly for Beth. What have been some of the unique challenges of leading a team through this crisis when you are relatively new to the role at CND? Anything you've learned from this situation that you think will help you in the role moving forward? You're doing an amazing job so far, so well done.
Thank you, Isabel. Well, yeah, it has been a bit of a challenge, although I kind of have relished the challenge quite a lot. Always found it easiest when I'm moving into a new role to be thrown into the deep end and just having no choice but to get on with it, really. I think while it's been possibly the most challenging part of my professional career today, I think it's also been one of the most exciting. I don't know how Steve and Jaimie feel about that, but it's that press day buzz every single day, which is exhausting, but it's great. And I think when you've got a really good team behind you, which I think we all do, it's really, really exciting to work with a team at the top of its game, consistently producing brilliant journalism, coming to you with fantastic ideas. But I think more than anything, It's been a really good way, I think, of forming quite a strong what I hope is quite a strong relationship with my team, because we've had no choice but to have to really get to know one another. We've been doing lots of virtual social things as well, and I think those strong bonds are really, really helping us get through this, not just professionally but personally as well. And I think that's what I'll try and take from this as well, and just knowing when to push them and when to hang back so that we all get through this in one piece, I think is really important as well. So I think that's something to take forward into the future as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you, guys. That's all we've got time for today. But thank you for joining us all today. We really hope you enjoyed the session. We've got a fourth BSME Lockdown Lunch planned for Wednesday, 20th of May at 1 o'clock, when we'll be speaking to 3 editors of the country's top food media brands about how they are feeding the passions of their readers during this unprecedented time. The title is How Food Editors Are Fueling a Kitchen Renaissance, which I can vouch for. I am definitely more in the kitchen. It's going to be moderated by our BSME Vice Chair, Laura Rowe, also editor of Olive Magazine, and she'll lead the conversation with Karen Barnes from Delicious, Christine Hayes from BBC Good Food, and Gabby Hubbard from Good Housekeeping. Yesterday, we also announced our shortlisted entries for our Talent Awards. I believe we've got a few people here that have been shortlisted. Hands up if you've been shortlisted, I think, on the panel. Two of you, at least.
Not me personally, but well done, Tom.
Well, the title has been. That's what counts. BSME hugely enjoyed going through the hundreds of entries for the best writers, designers, sub-editors, production teams and support staff who make Britain's magazine industry the best in the world. And I have to say, the standard of entries was absolutely excellent and really good to see. The judging will commence next, which has already prompted fierce debate amongst all of us committee members and judges. Thank you so far for everyone who entered, and congratulations to everyone who's been shortlisted. Do keep an eye on all our social threads for further news on this. Excuse me, I have got my phone on silent, but my computer is also linked up to my phone. I do apologise. And now thank you also to Jaimie, Kaffash from editor from Pulse, Steve Ford, editor from Nursing Times, Beth Kennedy, editor of C&D, and thank you to the BSME team behind the scenes and screens, including our fab interns from Roehampton University, Alexandra and Jasmina. And goodbye from me, Maria Pieri, 2020 BSME Chair. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Stay safe, stay well. Take care, everyone. Bye.